It's the month of November, one of my favourite times of the year. It's a time for wrapping up warm in cosy jackets and coats, scarves and hats and gloves. The trees fully turning orange and yellow and red. Retreating to the fire or under the covers with a hot chocolate or coffee, tea, curling up with those nearest and dearest as we await the end of the year to celebrate one of my favourite times of the year. This video contains whispered facts about November, accompanied with autumnal visuals. So sit back and relax and enjoy some trivia about November. November's name has remained unchanged since the ancient Roman calendar, which was in use until 45 BC. This first Roman calendar was only made up of 10 months, with November being the 9th month. November actually translates rather appropriately into 9th month in Latin. When the Julian calendar was adopted in 45 BC, 2 new months were added, which pushed November back to the 11th month. Despite its change in position, November was never renamed. The Anglo-Saxons had quite a fitting name for November. It's usually at this time of the year in the northern hemisphere that cold winds start to chill you to the bone, and as such they called it Wind Month or Wind Month. The Anglo-Saxons also called the month of November Blood Month or Blood Month. It gained this name as it's in November that they would traditionally slaughter cows to provide food for the long winter months. The 5th of November marks a historic day in the United Kingdom. On this day, in 1605, a group of Roman Catholics plotted to blow up the English Parliament while King James I was inside. Fortunately, the plot was foiled, and every year festivities are held across the country to celebrate the group's failure, which includes setting off countless fireworks, lighting bonfires, and even setting alight effigies of Guy Fawkes, one of the conspirators. It's a fun celebration, and one that I will tell you a little bit more about. The Gunpowder Plot of 1605 was meant to kill the Protestant King James I and replace him with a Catholic queen. It was actually Robert Catesby who led the Gunpowder Plot, who was born in Warwickshire, and led it, not Guy Fawkes. There were also 13 other people involved. The job Guy Fawkes had in the Gunpowder Plot was to guard the 36 barrels of gunpowder that had been placed in a basement underneath the House of Lords. The alarm was raised after an anonymous letter was sent to Lord Monteagle, warning him to stay away from the House of Lords. The explosive expert, Fawkes, who had been left in a cellar to set off the fuse, was subsequently caught when a group of guards discovered him at the last moment on the 5th of November. He was then taken to the Tower of London. As he awaited his grisly punishment on the gallows, Fawkes leapt to his death to avoid the horrors of torture that awaited him. He died of respect for their former pupil, Guy Fawkes. And the Houses of Parliament are still searched by the Yeomen of the Guard before the state opening, where the reigning monarch visits Parliament each year, held in November. It is ceremonial rather than serious, and is performed with lanterns. The United States has its own historic day too. Thanksgiving is celebrated on the fourth Thursday of November and has been celebrated since 1621. The first Thanksgiving was a feast celebrating the first bountiful harvest of the Pilgrims of Plymouth and New England. It is still celebrated in a similar way, with families coming together and sharing plentiful amounts of food traditionally available during November. I, for one, would love a slice of pumpkin pie, please. The full moon in November is traditionally called Beaver Moon in the US. The tradition goes back to North America's early colonial years, as it was during this time of year that hunters would set their beaver traps for the last time before the lakes and water sources they lived in froze over. November has just one birthstone, the radiant topaz. The topaz is symbolic of many things, but most of all, it is a symbol of strength and honour. The ancient Greeks also believed that the stone had the ability to turn oneself invisible. November also only has one birth flower, although with a flower like this, who needs another? I'm talking about the ever-stylish chrysanthemum, which to the most extent symbolises cheerfulness. Different coloured chrysanthemums have different meanings though. A white one symbolises pure love and truth. A red says I love you, like nothing else does, while a yellow flower is a symbol of unrequited love. November the 3rd, 1957 was a historic day for both Soviet Russia and the world. It was on this day that the first spacecraft carrying a live passenger was successfully launched into space. The passenger was Laika the dog, an unassuming-looking stray pooch who had been found on the streets of Moscow. The Soviets used stray dogs in their tests because they assumed that they would be used to the hunger and cold that they would inevitably experience in outer space. A rather hairy spectacle occurs in various parts of the world, including Australia, the United States and England every year in November. It's called Movember, and the idea is to raise money for charity by growing a moustache. Participants must shave on the first morning of November and grow their moustache throughout the month, with the ensuing amusement as an incentive for others to donate to a good cause. Men's health and men's mental health, of course, being a key focus. The beginning of the end of the War of Independence began on November the 30th, 1782, when a provisional treaty was signed between the newly formed United States of America and the Kingdom of Great Britain. The final treaty wasn't completed and signed until nearly a year later in Paris on September the 3rd, 1783. Like all other months of the year, a number of famous and important people have been born in November. Some of the more notable people include Mark Twain, Leonardo DiCaprio, Winston Churchill, Kurt Vonnegut, and Scarlett Johansson. Those born in November can be born under one of two very different star signs. If you're born before November the 23rd, then you have the sign of Scorpio. Those born on November the 23rd or later have the sign Sagittarius. Scorpios are said to value trust and honesty above other things, as well as being quite intense yet imaginative people. Those born under the sign of Sagittarius are quite different, being energetic and idealistic, while also generous and open-minded. November is apparently the official month for banana pudding lovers. If you're not a big fan of pudding, don't worry, there are also plenty of other things to celebrate, as November is also National Novel Writing Month in the US, National Pomegranate Month, and National Adoption Month in the US, among others. On November the 19th, 1863, President Abraham Lincoln delivered the Gettysburg Address at the consecration of the National Cemetery at the site of the Gettysburg Battle. While Lincoln's speech was just 2 minutes long, it summed up everything important there is about democracy. Interestingly, Lincoln was in the middle of a minor bout of smallpox while he gave the speech, and looked drained and ghost-like. If month-long celebrations aren't really your thing, then you can always check out the National Cook for Your Pets Day on November the 1st. There is also World Vegan Day on November the 1st, Veterans Day on the 11th, National Button Day on the 16th, and National Cake Day on the 26th in the United States. William Shakespeare apparently wasn't all too fond of November. Hailed as one of the all-time greatest writers of English literature, Shakespeare wrote 154 sonnets and 37 plays, which are still in production today. In all of the works that Shakespeare wrote, the month of November isn't mentioned a single time. Other dates for the diary are All Saints' Day on the 1st, Election Day in the US on the 2nd, November the 3rd is Sadie Hawkins Day, November the 4th is Diwali, an annual festival of lights celebrating the triumph of good over evil. November the 4th is also Will Rogers Day. November the 7th at 2 a.m. is the end of daylight saving time in the United States. If you're fortunate, you may experience an Indian summer in November, but according to the traditional definition, it can only occur between November the 11th and 20th. November the 19th is the discovery of Puerto Rico Day. November the 28th marks the start of Hanukkah at sundown, and it is also the first Sunday of Advent. In November 2021, November's full moon occurs on Friday, November the 19th at 3:59 a.m, where you could have caught a partial lunar eclipse, which is visible or was visible from parts of North America. In terms of weather, according to weather folklore, a heavy November snow will last until April. Other folklore statements about the weather include, if there's ice in November that will bear a duck, there'll be nothing after but sludge and muck. November take flail, let ships no more sail. If trees show buds in November, the winter will last until May. There is no better